2 months into the year where I'm working at 2 different high schools at the same time. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm a music teacher and this is my life. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you saw the title or heard what I just said in the intro, then you heard me right. I am working at 2 different high schools at the same time, and this is what's known as being itinerant, where you are back and forth between 2 different work sites, but with one employer. And for me, that employer is the school board that I work for. Well, in today's video, I'm going to share with you what a typical day in my work schedule is like, what some of the pros and cons are, and I'm going to wrap this video up by telling you if I think it's worth it to be itinerant or work at 2 different schools at the same time. But before we jump in, remember to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to ring the notification bell so that you're up to date on all future content on this channel. So let's start by walking you through what my day-to-day schedule looks like. Now, every other day looks a little bit different because my school board uses what's called a day 1, day 2 schedule. So, for example, if on a day 1, which are all of the odd numbered days, we have block A, B, then lunch, and then block C and D, then what happens is on day 2, which is any even numbered day, the morning 2 classes will switch. So you'll have block B, then block A, then lunch, and then the 2 afternoon classes will switch. So on day 2, you'll have block D and block C. So what this means is I'm going to be teaching a different period 1 class every other day, depending on if it's a day 1 or a day 2 schedule. So a few things will change, but for the most part, this will be a pretty similar day-to-day schedule. So in order to make it to the commute for my first school, I wake up at around like 5:30 in the morning, and the school doesn't start until 9:05. But I do this because I want to make sure that I beat the traffic, and I live in a city where there are a lot of government workers, and so all that to say, there can be a lot of traffic on the roads even if you avoid the highways. I try to leave around an hour and a half before the school day starts because I know that 1, traffic can be super busy, and 2, I want to make sure that I am in my classroom on time to be able to set things up. All of my classes are in different rooms this semester, which means on a day 1, I'll be in one room, and on a day 2, I'll be in another room to start off my day. Now, before I start my classes, a few things need to take place. I make sure that the projector's working, that the speakers are working for my laptop if I need to share videos with my classes, and I need to make sure that I uncover all of the windows, that all the Chromebooks from the night before are plugged into the tech tub, and of course that the classroom door is unlocked, the lights are on, and the windows are uncovered. My morning classes run from 9:05 until 11:40, so each of my classes are 75-minute periods. And when the bell rings after the first period, there is 5 minutes between the 2 classes. And then at the beginning of second period is when, at my morning school, they do things like the national anthem and morning announcements. So this means that I have to switch pretty quickly from one classroom to another every single day, but that's pretty normal compared to the other teachers in the building. The biggest difference between my schedule and a schedule where a teacher only has to work in one building is that as soon as the bell rings, I start packing up my belongings, and I have about 10 minutes before I plan on leaving my morning school to make it to my afternoon school. Now, the commute's only about 20 or so minutes, but keep in mind that if my last class ends at 11:40, it takes me about 10 minutes to pack up and maybe talk to a couple of my colleagues that if there's something important before I leave. If I'm leaving at 11:50 and it's about a 20-25 minute drive, I'm going to get there around 12:10 or 12:15. Well, the bell for my afternoon school, the warning bell after lunch to let people know, hey, it's time to get ready to go to class, is 12:23. And if it's a day 1 schedule, I actually have my prep period where instead of having a class to teach, I have 75 minutes in the day where I could be marking assignments or planning some different lessons or activities or emailing teachers or colleagues, emailing parents, things like that. And then every other day, I will have my class right after lunch. So on the day that I'm filming this, it was a day 1 schedule, which means that I had my prep period after the lunchtime, And then I had my final class of the day at my second school. Now, the biggest sacrifice here is obviously the fact that you're probably eating on the road. And so every other day, part of my lunch I eat during my prep. And sometimes, for example, on a day one, that's kind of early afternoons between like 12:30 and 1:45. And on a day two, when my class is right after lunch and the bell rings at 12:23 and I have to head to that classroom, then I end up eating my lunch later on in the afternoon. The good news is that at the very least, my commute is cut in half because my afternoon school is on the way home from the morning school. But all that to say, I end up getting home from work around, I guess, 4-ish. So that's what I guess the average day looks like in terms of timing. So let's jump in now to what some of the pros and cons are of being itinerant. Now, one of the big pros with being itinerant or working at two different schools is that it can help boost your income. So if you're someone who's a part-time teacher and you really need full-time income, then working at two different schools can be a great option for you if you're looking to supplement your income, but you have to make sure that you have enough time at lunchtime to get from one location to another. Otherwise, it's not going to make a lot of financial sense if you're like spending money on Ubers or taxis every day just to make it on time. So if you're not in the position where you already have a car, then I would say financially it doesn't make a lot of sense. But a big pro, of course, is that if your one school doesn't have enough work for you, it can be one opportunity to make a little bit more money. Another pro in this situation is that it can help increase your level of experience, and that can be really helpful when it comes to retirement. So in publicly funded schools where I live, my province actually does have a teacher's pension plan, and there's something called the 85 factor, where your years of teaching experience plus your age needs to equal 85 in order to retire. And so the more work experience you can get earlier on in your career, the better you are financially. Now, obviously for the paycheck, but also you're contributing to your pension, and it can be part of that 85 factor. Also, keep in mind that in publicly funded school systems where I live, a teacher's salary is based on how many years of experience they have and what their education is like. So like a 3-year bachelor versus a 4-year bachelor versus a master's degree, things like that. Another pro to this is that you can actually establish some more connections in different schools. And that can be really helpful if you're someone who's thinking of maybe transferring to a different school for various reasons, whether it's closer to home, whether it's they have a job in that grade level or that subject that you'd love to teach. But you can make a lot more connections at these different schools and pick teachers' brains. You can be exposed to different maybe socioeconomic groups or exposed to different programs that are only offered at some schools compared to others. So you can really see what different schools in your school board, for example, have to offer. Now, what are some of the cons? Well, a big con, like I said earlier, is that you are pressed for time. You are eating on the road or you're eating later on in the afternoon and it cuts into your prep time. And it's a daily thing to think about. Will I get to that afternoon school on time? So you definitely need to be more prepared with your planning to make sure that you are at that school on time. Another con with this is that if you're between two different schools, it can be really hard to get involved in the extracurricular activities that go on in the school. So for example, if you're a teacher who wants to be a teacher advisor to student council or run a ski club, or someone who wants to coach or do music activities either before or after school, well, I'm on the road at lunchtime and my commute is already so long in the morning that I am not really able to commit to a maybe before school music activity. And then after school, well, I'm in a different building. And so it can be really tricky to try and navigate those ways in which you might want to be more involved in your extracurricular activities that go on at school. Another con, and I think this might be the biggest one that has impacted my day-to-day life, is that when you're not eating lunch at lunchtime, and this is going to sound like such a small thing, but it really does make a big difference, it cuts into your prep time. When I say prep time, now that's the time where I would be maybe marking assignments, planning lessons and activities, writing emails to colleagues or parents of my students. The reality is that I am not the best version of a teacher or of myself if I'm hungry, if I'm thirsty, if I have headaches, any of those things. And the reality is that there's a little bit of added stress When there are things like parent-teacher interviews that are scheduled on the same night of the semester, and that's part of our contractual obligation to do that for both of our schools. Or if there are staff meetings that happen on the same night of the month. So do I go to the first school or the afternoon school? Both my schools have been pretty accommodating and understanding about that, but it's just one extra thing I have to think about. The other reality, and this is also a con, is that I end up taking a lot more of my work home, meaning I do a lot more lesson planning and marking at home than I used to. And I could choose to stay at my afternoon school longer after the school day ends, but in order to try and beat that evening traffic, I end up leaving earlier so that I'm not home quite as late. And of course, that means I have to take a good chunk of my schoolwork or my job home with me. The last con that I'll share here is just the fact that I probably get more emails now than I ever did before. And if I'm not careful, I can mix up whether it's an email from a teacher at my morning school or my afternoon school. So it's definitely something else that I have to keep on top of. Now, to be fair, I've been working at the same school that I'm working at in the mornings this semester all of last year. But even though I know a lot of those teachers, there have also been new staff that have joined that team since last year. So I can still end up getting tripped up over whether or not a teacher's from my morning school or afternoon school. And it seems like a small thing, but I don't want to end up sending an email about a student that, say, that other teacher's never heard of because they go to a totally different school. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to being an itinerant employee of a school board working at 2 schools, but I wanted to finish this short and sweet video by answering the question, is it worth it to be itinerant? Is it worth the driving back and forth and the additional work to go back and forth between 2 different schools every day? And I think one important answer is it depends. Now, this is not a cop-out answer. Hear me out. I think this can be worth it in a lot of ways. In my situation, I chose to do this because I was a part-time permanent employee looking to supplement my income. And so it was definitely worth it for me to be able to supplement my income at a school where the timing of the classes every day and how long the commute was actually worked out well for me. The schools are a 20-minute drive apart and their lunch hour is 50 minutes. And the good news is that both of those schools' lunch hours end at 12:30, the same time, which meant that I knew that it was possible before I even applied for that afternoon school's position that it could work for me. It can also be worth it if you're a part-time permanent employee and you're looking to add more experience to your resume and to make those connections, like some of the pros that I mentioned in my list earlier. So absolutely, this can be worth it for you. Now, there's a really big thing that you need to keep in mind. Is it worth it? I don't think it's worth it if you've never taught one of the courses before. So in my afternoon class, I'm teaching a resource class, and the course is learning strategies. That's a course that I've taught multiple times before. I have lessons planned, I have activities and assignments planned, so I can just grab those from my Google Drive and assign them to students and explain them. And there's not as much planning the course specifically as there would be if I was teaching, say, a course that I had never taught before. So I don't think it's worth it if you have to spend hours and hours and hours of additional time planning and preparing the course, which hopefully you did over the summertime. But sometimes if those jobs that you're taking at that second school are LTOs, sometimes you don't actually get to apply for that job until August. And our school years here in Canada don't start until September. So you may not have that whole summertime to start prepping your courses. And we know that the provincial curriculum is a little bit vague on purpose. There are overall expectations, but it's really flexible so that teachers can cater it to the needs of their students. So all that to say, it's not like the course is already prepped for you. So I don't think it would be worth it if you think that additional amount of work is going to be too much for you to handle. It's also not worth it if it's just going to add more stress to your plate. Now, it's a job. We all know that jobs require work. But if you already have a lot on your plate, if you have, say, some extenuating family circumstances at home, if you're a primary caregiver, if your mental health isn't in the best place, if you find that your stress levels are just through the roof, then don't feel like you have to do this. If you're applying for a job that's at a different school, hopefully you've already taken a look at their schedule. You've already looked at what the job posting says the course is, what the different requirements are, and you know if you've taught it before. So can it be worthwhile? Yes. But are there a lot of things that can maybe wear you down over time? Also, yes, it takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more preparation. I have to be more prepared in advance now, more than I have ever needed to. And so I think you just have to weigh the pros and cons and decide if it's right for you. But this semester, it was. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, like I said. I could easily do a part 2 of this kind of video, so let me know down in the comments if you'd like a part 2 to what it's like working at 2 different schools, because I will be working at 2 different schools for the rest of this semester. Let me know in the comments also what other kinds of videos you'd like to see. Remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and be sure to give us a follow over on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you right back on this channel with another video.